Patrick Gannon, the co-captain for the National Drive Electric Week here in Sarasota. Welcome to Electrify the Island, and this afternoon's presentation on electric vehicle charging in multi-unit dwellings. Full disclosure, I'm also serve as president for the Downtown Sarasota Condominium Association, and so part of this activities is also being supported by that organization. The slides and the video of this is actually going out live over Twitter, Periscope as we speak, and we'll capture the video and put that up on the website for folks who are not here. So we'll be recording this. We're really fortunate to have here today as our special guest presenter, Anne Louise Seabury from FPL, drove all the way from the East Coast. So thank you, and I'll let you start off, and then I'll wrap up with just a few comments about some of the local experiences. So,
great,
anyway, thanks for being here.
So first I've got to ask, how many of you are EV owners? Okay. How many of you are just learning about EVs? Great. Did you go to the morning presentation? Okay. Then those of you that have EVs, bear with me because I am going to take the first 10 minutes or so and go over the benefits of EVs, and maybe we'll have some people that leave here and go to the dealership and buy a car. So bear with me, and actually you guys are the EV experts as owners, so chime in and share your experiences as well. So I'm going to cover the EV basics, and then what we're going to end up spending most of our time on, hopefully an interactive dialogue on barriers and solutions to get charging into multi-unit dwellings. So that's really what we're here to talk about, where we're going to spend most of our time. And quite honestly, there's no easy solution there, so I hope your expectations aren't high, that I'm going to give you the answer and you're going to walk away and get charging in your condos immediately. But we will explore what I'm aware of some other buildings being able to do. So there are a lot of good reasons to buy EVs, and in my opinion, the reason why it's not pervasive in EVs everywhere isn't a technology issue, it's not batteries, it's not range, it's not lack of charging infrastructure, it's not all those things you're probably thinking is the reason why you shouldn't be driving an EV. It's simply lack of education. If I'm able to spend a half an hour with somebody and really educate them about what EVs are all about, what their current driving habits are, and all of those different questions that come up, most people walk away thinking that they really could actually go buy an EV and that it's right for them. So I want to emphasize that point. Most people are suited for an electric vehicle today before there's any other technological advances. One of the primary benefits of an EV is that it's significantly cheaper to drive. Even with today's low gas prices, EVs are 70% cheaper than a gas-powered vehicle. So what does that mean? Just a good rule of thumb, for every 1,000 miles you drive, you might expect your electric bill to be impacted by about 30 bucks. So consider what you're paying in gas right now. That's a stark difference, and that's even compared to today's gas prices. So very cheap to fuel. Another is they're considerably environmentally better. Even when you consider the upstream power plant emissions of fueling an electric vehicle, it's 70% cleaner. So, and that's, I believe it's compared to a 23 mile per gallon vehicle. There's been a lot of studies nationwide on this. It depends on how clean your grid is. We're fortunate down here in Florida that we've got a clean grid, but even in states that use coal as their primary fuel source, EVs can be cleaner. It helps us reduce our dependence on foreign oil and all of the political issues and economics that go into that. So it keeps our dollars here using predominantly domestic sources of energy. And honestly, they're fun. Truly, get behind the wheel and drive. Larry, we do have test drives today, right?
Yeah, I know we have at least a Tesla and a Volt.
Okay.
We may have others.
Great. Well, they all feel a little bit different, but the one thing they all have in common is instantaneous acceleration. It's not like any gas-powered car you've ever driven. So they're a lot of fun. They are different. So if you drive one and it's not for you, go drive another one, because you will find one that you enjoy. The other thing is, we're 4 or 5 years into the market. There's beginning to be a lot of choice out there. So EVs truly go as far as you do. If you really think about your daily driving needs, don't buy the car that meets your one family vacation to the mountains every year. You can rent a car for that. You buy a car that meets your daily driving habits. Most people drive less than 40 miles a day, which is well within the range of most vehicles on the market. And if you're one of those that do drive far on a regular basis, you get a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle where you can serve your electric needs most days, and on the days that that doesn't suffice, you've got a gas backup to take you further. There's also a lot more models on the road now, and there's many more to come. 2016, 2017 is going to just explode with the amount of variety on the market today. One of the areas today that there are not EVs or SUVs, and that's changing within the next year or so. So if you need a lot of space for family, luggage, what have you, there'll be some options for you. This one bothers me. It is a complete misconception that electric vehicles are for the wealthy only. If you just Google used Nissan Leaf, for example, you can find one for $11,000 with not a lot of miles on it. EVs, brand new, come in all price ranges, from the 20s on up to well over 100. So there's definitely options within most price brackets. When you ask a current EV driver what their favorite part is, it's probably not what they would have originally anticipated, but it's never having to go to the gas station again. And I'm guilty of that. On the rare occasion that I have to go, I'm just angry about it. It's an inconvenience. You don't really think about it because it's just part of your daily habit and just takes a few minutes, but it's a few minutes you don't have to take. You don't have to get your hands smelly and deal with people getting out of the car. It's hot out. Plugging in an EV just takes a couple seconds. It's that easy. I know people worry about how long it takes to charge, but that's meaningless too. Your car spends most of its time parked. And if it's plugged in while it's parked, it's charging. It's a non-issue, trust me. Convenience. Most charging happens at home, happens while you're sleeping. Many more companies are adding charging so that you could charge while you're at work. That's convenient, especially because those parking spaces are usually close to the door, so that's another benefit. And then on the go, I know Sarasota is very committed to charging and has some public charging stations. You could charge while you're out and about. Go have dinner and get some free juice for your car. So a little charging 101 here. There's 3 primary types of charging today. AC level 1 is typically just charging on a standard household outlet. It gets you about 4 to 6 miles per hour of charging, which essentially is a full charge overnight. If you drive a lot of miles, say more than 40, you certainly should upgrade to a level 2 charger, which gets you, this is a huge range I know, but between 8 and 60 miles per hour of charge. That is a huge variable dependent upon 2 things: your installation, how many amps you choose to install your equipment, but also your vehicle. Some vehicles charge at a maximum of 3.3 kW, some charge at level 2 a maximum of 19 kW. So that's why there's a huge variation there. The true rule of thumb is between 15 to 25 miles per hour charge is what you would likely see there. And then DC fast charging, we're beginning to see a lot more DC fast charging around the state. That's where you can fill up 80% in less than a half an hour. Again, just a general rule of thumb based on the equipment in the vehicle. Okay, so this is why we're here. As I mentioned before, most charging happens at home. So I would say between 80 to 90% of your car's needs happen at home. So we need to make sure that charging is available in people's homes. And that becomes a challenge if you live in a condo. So I'm guessing everybody here lives in a condo? Yeah, okay. Have you already had these discussions with your condo associations? You have, and you're running into some barriers? Okay. So we're going to talk about it. Again, I'm not promising a solution here, but we'll explore. And this is the part that it really should be interactive. So please ask questions and share your experiences as we go, okay? I just have a few slides left. And here are some of the challenges that I've heard when talking to people about why it's difficult to get charging in place. Just the numerous stakeholders. You could have the excuse, I don't like being on camera for this, but you've got the nosy neighbor who's got to put their 2 cents into everything, and of course their opinion matters in an HOA. You've got the board, you have legal, you have all kinds of parties involved for you getting your charging station in place. The cost is another. Who pays? Is it the building? Is it the owner? There's a number of different point of views there. And then it might be a hybrid, which I'll talk about in a minute. In the ideal scenario, I'll talk to you about who should pay for what. Capacity. If you're in a building built in the 60s or 70s, you might not have panel capacity to put in charging. Or you have to think ahead. There might be panel capacity for you, but what about your neighbor 5 years from now? Because you've already taken it all up. So this is where policies come into place that you might not like the answer because it might restrict you in how much juice you can take, but you've got to look out for your neighbors 5 years from now. So that's one of the issues. And then I know people are protective over their parking spaces, but reassigning parking spaces is certainly a solution we'll talk about in a minute. But here's why it's worth it. Here's why it's worth working with your buildings and trying to figure it all out, because there's certainly some benefits here, and benefits beyond those that I just spoke about, environmental and so forth. But the buildings that are doing this, and I end up talking to probably more buildings willing to do this than are not willing to do it, because they're looking for help from me. But they see it as a way of differentiating their buildings from others. It's a way of, they know high-end people drive high-end cars, are interested in electric, and they want to make their buildings attractive to them. And it could add value to the property, makes a statement about your commitment to the environment. And this one I believe is true. It offers yet another amenity similar to a fitness center, pool, marina, what have you. Okay, so this is where I'd like to spend a bit of time. So at the top are all the various questions you should consider when installing. The ideal, we all probably in this room believe it, is the owner's parking space. So every owner should be able to charge in their parking space. They never have to worry about getting up and moving their car. It's convenient, it's available for them. Whether that's possible or not is questionable. One of the easiest things to do is put it in a shared space. Put it in either the visitor's parking area, shared parking area, or valet. And what I've had a lot of success doing in this past year, in the buildings that have valet parking, you could put 1 or 2 charging spaces in there. The valet manages moving the cars through it, cycling it through, and then moving the owner's car to their space later. That way, you don't have to worry about panel capacity so much because it's just a few spaces, but you're able to serve the needs of the whole building. That's a really great short-term solution. Long-term, let's hope that 20% of the vehicles on the road are EVs one day. That probably is not going to be sufficient for days like that. So in my opinion, the ideal solution would be to have the shared spaces and plan for a long-term greater solution, which I'll talk about in a minute. Who pays for the installation? Well, I'll tell you what's been happening mostly is the users have been paying for it, especially if it's going to their own spaces. Places where it's going to shared spaces or valet, the building's been paying for it, or third-party funding, which I've seen, can't count on it in the long term. However, some automakers are actually paying for it in that scenario. EVSP, anybody know what that stands for? Not you. At FPL, we're all about acronyms. EVSP is Electric Vehicle Service Provider. So that's a company who makes a profit by putting in charging infrastructure. So multi-unit dwellings is now a big business. There's unmet need, and they're trying to figure out how to crack it. So some companies will come in, they'll pay to put in the infrastructure, they put in smart charging equipment, and they will charge their users for it, and they'll reimburse the HOA for the service and for the electricity consumption. So that's what an EVSP is. Definitely a viable solution, particularly in the future as the models get tested. Quite a bit more expensive than a do-it-yourself method. And then there's a hybrid, and again, this is the one that probably makes sense since it's the best. I'll save it for last to talk about. Who pays for it? The electric use. Once you've got the whole capital deployment done, there's the ongoing electricity use. I think this ends up becoming an issue because people don't realize how cheap EVs are to fuel. If you have somebody driving 500 miles a month, it's 15 bucks. It's not even noticeable on a electric bill. But it is an issue. So you need to determine who's paying for the ongoing electric use. Is it the building? Is it the user? How is that being determined? And then how are fees allocated? If it's going to their individual electric meter, it's easy. It's just part of the user's electric bill, nothing to worry about. If it's part of a common meter, and they decide that it's not just an amenity like the fitness center or condo, they need to devise a method for reimbursement, which could be a flat fee, just a flat 10, 15, 20, whatever the amount they decide per month. Or I've seen some put mini meters on the equipment and monthly go track what the kilowatt hour consumption was. We don't advise putting a second meter on the building. It just adds a lot of cost and complexity to it for not a lot of benefit. So there are some solutions. I mean, I've done all the talking here. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Okay.
What's a PEV?
Oh, Lord, I am so sorry. Plug-in electric vehicle.
Thank you.
It's an electric vehicle that gets its power from the grid. So all of the vehicles you see down there are plug-in electric vehicles. It's sort of the catch-all. There's a number of different kinds of plug-in electric vehicles. There's a full battery electric, like the Leaf or the Tesla, or a plug-in hybrid electric, which also has a gas engine, but also gets its power from the grid, like a Ford Fusion electric or a Volt. Thank you for asking that. I'm sorry.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, let me talk about the best scenario, okay? This is the best, and I have one building of all the ones I've talked to working toward this, okay? So I'm not gonna minimize it. The best solution, initially, you have valet, you put in the shared parking spaces. You've met your needs immediately with not a lot of work. Long term might not work if everybody's buying EVs. So here's what I believe is the ideal. The building, the HOA invests to first they come up with smart policies, and they come up with what's the maximum power that each person in a parking space could draw. And they have to do that based on their capacity and all of that. For some buildings, it could be 30 amps, others might limit it at 15, but come up with a policy of what they're gonna limit each parking space to do long term. And then the building pay to put the right sized conduit to all corners of the garage, what have you. That way, if the alternative is having each individual owner pay for this upgrade, then you're gonna end up with conduit all over your wall everywhere. And no, it just doesn't look as good. It's not as smartly done. It costs more in the end. And you don't have a limit of what your panel capacity is. So if you have your building make your initial investment just to bring the conduit, and then you have your individual owners run it and do it as they need to from that main conduit to their spaces. To me, again, my opinion, that with our knowledge today, with our current technology, is the best approach if you're able to get your building to agree. Any questions or pushback about AL's model?
The only question I would have is, beyond the valet solution, using the solution you just proposed, is what about those people who need their charging now? You know, they just bought a car, they'd like to buy a car, and you're going to have to do a study to decide what the capacity is per future residents who don't even have a need right now. So can you just talk a little bit further about how that second solution accommodates the person who needs one?
And they're not able to have charging at valet to begin with?
Well, yeah, let's assume we move past valet, right, and then we use your preferred solution. How do you get?
I don't think that study needs to take a long time. You see how many cars you have, how many cars can your lot take, make some assumption of how many of those could be EVs in the future and what your panel is, and make an assumption. Let's face it, if you have valet, a high-powered valet charging, you only need level 1 in your parking space because you have the option to charge faster if you need it. But for most days, the level 1 might be sufficient for your needs. If you're able to go up higher and they're able to give you additional amps, that's great, but it's not essential. I think most owners would be happy to have level 1 and a faster level 2 solution. I'll give you an example as somebody who's been driving an EV for a long time. I just use level 1 at my house. Let's say I had a Tesla. I know you have a Tesla. And I'm using level 1 for daily needs at home because I drive 25 miles to and from work. My daily commute's 40 miles. I can charge level 1 overnight, no problem. Let's say I drive my Tesla to and from Miami. I'm not able to fully recharge overnight. It doesn't get me anywhere, but I do need a faster charge. That's where if I needed to, I could go to public charging or I could go to a DC fast charge to get me up where I need to be so that I can get back to my normal daily habits. That's where the combination between public and residential work together to get people the charging they need. It's the same argument I said, don't buy a car to suit your one family vacation a year where you drive up to the mountains. The same thing with driving, daily driving habits. What's your daily driving needs? What are your charging needs? And size it for that. Those days where you do those long road trips, you've got public charging or the valet charging to get you bumped up to where you could get back to your normal capacity. Does that make sense? I know owners don't like to hear it, faster's better, but faster's not always possible if you live in a condo. You have to look out for your neighbors too. You don't want to be the first one to get it all. Early bird gets the worms. That doesn't help the industry.
You know, there's all kinds of things that people in condo have to pay for that might not use. A gym, a community room, a pool. You know, I might not swim, but I gotta pay for that pool. I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around the condo, either the property manager or whoever's digging their heels in that don't see this as an amenity. It is an amenity. And it should be treated just like a pool or a gym or something else that everybody's got access to and everybody pays for.
In shared parking spaces or valet, I absolutely agree with you. Yes, and again, that's where education comes in. I think if you run into that barrier, the first thing you have to make sure is that they understand how cheap it is to charge a vehicle. They might be thinking that it costs them $100 to fill up their Tahoe, and that's what it's going to cost you to fill up your EV. That it's just an education thing. So before you get mad at them, make sure they understand how cheap it is.
We met with one yesterday, Patrick and I was like ready to just throw up my arms and say, okay, forget it, it won't work. Because they're just...
Give them my phone number. I'll be happy to talk to them. Any other questions?
How do you determine where there are public charging stations?
That's easy. These cars make everything easy for you. They pop up on your car's display, and every EV is different, but they all get the charging thing down. So on your EV's display as you're driving, in fact, I didn't even put Moat in my GPS because I saw a charging station. I'm like, all right, it's in the general area. This has to be Moat, and I just followed my car to here. Your iPhone or whatever phone you have, there's all kinds of apps. Even Google, you could search charging, and there it is. Trust me, again, I've been driving an EV for a very long time, and I've only used public charging a handful of times. You don't need it as much as you think you do. Yes?
I was surprised to see that a restaurant right down the street from us, that's brand new, they just opened their doors, has installed a free electric charging station.
It's great.
And it's not all but I'm curious, you know, at a restaurant, if it's free, first of all, to charge the minimum time, I would guess, and I don't know, of course, would be an hour or more, you know. So if somebody's charging their car, it's tied up for quite a long period of time, I would assume. But I'm also told that they, and this is interesting to me, that, at least to me, that it's new construction of this restaurant, therefore they were mandated by law, they had to put it in. Could you comment on that?
I am not aware of that mandate. Do you know what city that is? Because I'd love to look into. I'll look into that. I was not aware that that's a
It's
code.
Culver's Restaurant.
This is something that could be happening,
Yeah.
but I'd be surprised.
The only code that I'm aware of, like, there's one down in Lauderhill where new residential construction has to have it. Jupiter just passed one that any new or major renovation on a gas station that has a connected quick serve restaurant or store has to have DC fast charging. So I wouldn't be surprised if something popped up. I just hadn't heard about it yet. But let me comment on your point about a free charging station. Chris has one of the best examples I've ever heard of. These stores are no dummies. They know who's driving an EV. They know that people who drive EVs love free electricity. And they know that the longer that you're in the store, the more money you're gonna spend. And Chris, can you give your example? Because I give it all the time and I love to hear it straight from you.
Sure. So,
Come up here on camera.
okay. My mom and dad live on the east coast of Florida, so we were driving across the state to go visit them. And this was like 3 years ago. And I looked on my phone to see if there was a charging station in Brevard County. They're a little bit behind the times over there. But I look up, there's two of them. One's a Nissan, and I didn't think they were going to let me plug my Chevy into there. And then the other one was at a Kohl's. I said, honey, I don't even know what a Kohl's is. You ever been to a Kohl's? We've never been there before. But this Kohl's had a charging station at it. So I said, let's stop real quick. And we go right off the interstate. We stop. And I got maybe 10 miles of charge, which is like an hour, which is like, what, 90 cents? Or, I mean, not a whole lot. But while I was there charging, my wife bought $400 worth of dishes. And I went to the store manager and I said, hey, I wouldn't even be in your store if you didn't have a charging station out there. So we spend money and we spend time and money around these charging stations. And that's just a perfect example. I've never spent so much money around these Palm Avenue garage chargers either. Because they've got all these restaurants. I'm not going to go to another restaurant if I can go to the one near Palm Avenue garage and get some juice while I'm there. So an hour is just fine for me.
Great, perfect.
And you said your cost was like less than $1?
Oh, what is 3.3 kilowatts is the
Yeah.
charger on my car. That's per hour.
Yeah.
And if it's 10 cents a kilowatt hour, that's only 30
It's
cents.
like $1 for every 40 miles, and don't quote me on that. Things shift all the time
Yeah.
between the car's efficiency and our rates, but
Is the point.
yeah. Yes.
Can you talk about the cost of these installations, the three options that you spoke of at the front end?
Yeah, I've got a slide on that.
Okay, we'll wait for him. I have just a couple slides. If we don't meet it, bring it up again. Summary of steps. I'm a FPL person. We always talk processes. I'll skip that. You're not interested. This I do want to mention. A lot of buildings have an electrician. If you have to use them, great. I really urge you to get numerous quotes. At FPL, we put a lot of charging infrastructure in to support our fleet. We've put in a lot this year. We always, even though we have contractors routinely do our jobs for us, we always get multiple quotes. And even with contractors we know and trust, our quotes can vary, I am not exaggerating, from $5,000 up to $25,000 on a single job. Putting in an EV charging infrastructure is not hard, but there's a bit of an art to it if you give your electrician a little latitude to come up with a creative way. They do need to think different paths, different solutions, moving it a little bit, places to avoid trenching. So there are a lot of variables that can add up to a lot of different prices. So please, please don't let your buildings just use the same old electrician they've used a lot. This might be their only EV install job, and therefore you're not going to get the best price or best solution. And the other thing is, we try not to be prescriptive if we can. We try not to say that's where the space is going and that's where it's got to be, unless you have to do that, because there could be a lot better spaces to put it. There could be a closer panel, for example. So let the electrician be creative and come back with some solutions for you. You know where to find us, fpl.com/EV. If you need to email me and you forgot my name, it's electric-vehicles@fpl.com. Yes.
What's the liability? What are some things that could go wrong with the charging? you have installed in a condo complex? Or what can someone do wrong, or how can it be damaged or damage a car?
I'm not a lawyer, and your condo has a law firm, I'm sure, and there's all kinds of things to do. But from my experience, it is the equipment in terms of electrical shock and all of that, it's safe. I've never heard of a properly installed equipment by a licensed electrician and UL listed equipment, not homemade charging equipment, ever have a problem. The only thing I could possibly think of that could be damaging is a trip hazard because of the cord. For example, at our FPL latest install, we were installing it in a new garage. Instead of installing it at the last parking spaces where people have to walk through, we ended up installing them against a wall, which added a little bit of cost to it, but it was a place where people weren't going to be walking. So that's where you, again, a smart electrician's gonna, say, how about that spot, because nobody's gonna trip over the cord. Cord management, I think, in my opinion, is more something you think out for than, say, electrician or electrocution. Does that sort of answer your question? Okay.
I think also that may help is that we're not installing a any gas pump in these garages. These are inherently safer. A lot of people equate, well, it's a fueling station. One of the sense it is, but it isn't. Doesn't have all the attendant liability associated with what we think of when we think of fueling up a car. So it's, as Anne Louise was sort of saying, it's like having a large electric appliance. You don't worry about walking into your laundry room and you've got this electric device that's pulling 30 amps. You don't worry about that. It doesn't. You don't say, well, I better call my lawyer in to see what the liability issues are. And even in public laundry rooms, if that's a way of an analogy, there's not big legal issues about going to the laundry room. They're pulling the same amount of amps that some of these chargers are pulling.
Will attorneys have opinions because this is such a new?
Patrick, was it you or somebody else I was talking to? They went into Lexis, I guess it wasn't you, they went into LexisNexis trying to find current lawsuits about charging stations and they couldn't find any. Again, I didn't do it, this second-hand information, but I think there's, between the EV project, putting in thousands of stations, 300,000 cars on the road, 5 years, I think we would start seeing a trend by now if these were inherently dangerous and it's not there.
We
Yeah.
just,
Do you have?
Go ahead.
Do you have any information about how surges, electrical surges that can occur during storms, et cetera, and that do happen here in Florida often enough, how they would affect the car batteries?
I think if anyone were to hear about it, it would be us, since we're the utility, and I have not, knock wood, had any claims in that direction. The equipment in the cars, because surges do happen, the equipment in the cars are smart enough to handle them. So, Larry, you've had a car a while. Have you had a text saying that it's been interrupted and then it starts up again?
I've had my car for 2.5 years, and I'm a worrywart. I'm a professional worrywart. I've never had a problem. I have installed a whole house surge protection, just as sort of like suspenders, if you will, with my belt, to just minimize any possibilities. But I've never had a problem. I've never heard about a problem except, and this is all not even a documented problem. Somebody was charging at a public charging station, happened to be a supercharger station, and she claimed that her car was affected by it. This is out in the wild, so to speak, outside. There wasn't even in a garage. So, and I'm on these public forums all the time, so I'm not like a normal person. I'm trying. So in all the time I've been on the forums, that was the only instance that I've actually heard of even a potential of a problem. And I think Tesla took care of that problem. It was having to be Tesla.
Yeah.
But so it's really not much of a problem. I do think that there's certain charging solutions are inherently safer than others. When everything's hardwired and you can't get to, like a regular outlet, what they have for children, infant things, they close the outlet so you can't shove stuff in it. There's some charging solutions where you can actually plug a plug in. Those are safe, but they're less safe than something where you can't get something hardwired. And if there's concerns in condominiums about that, then it would go to a hardwired solution where you can't disconnect.
Yeah, there are level 1 hardwired solutions too. So if your condo does limit the amount of amps you can pull, you can buy a hardwired level 1 solution. You don't need the wall outlet.
Right.
What's the cost associated with someone who has a house in a garage?
Okay, were you gonna cover that or you want me to answer?
I'll cover the condo, but not a single
Okay.
house.
It really depends. You can buy a level 2 charging station for as low as $375 now. And then installation is truly the wild card. That could be nothing, just a few $100s to $2,000 if you need a panel upgrade or more. Or it also depends how long your run is. Like me, my garage is packed. I couldn't park in it if I wanted to. So I would have to do a long run outside my garage. So it depends. And then that's the low frill, low speed level 2. If you wanted something fancier, it would go on up from there.
Let me just add that my car has almost 20 kilowatt capacity for charging, so it can take a lot of charge. But I don't need that, as Anne-Louise was saying. In my garage, I put in a high capacity outlet, a 50 amp outlet, 240 volt outlet, which is similar to a dryer outlet. I put it next to the panel, and without permits, it cost $250, period. The rest of the charging equipment came with the car. So that, for my case, this is a low end case. It's high capacity because it's 40 amps. Right? When I say high capacity, I'm comparing it to public chargers, which are usually 30 amps. So that only costs $250. And usually when you buy a car, it comes with the charging equipment. On the other end of it, you can get into higher costs where you actually have buying charging equipment. The unit itself can be $2,600 just for the unit. Most people probably wouldn't put that in their garage. So the final point I'm getting at is you can get a high capacity for very little money if you wish.
That's it.